Justin Gaethje is fighting arguably one of the greatest wrestlers in mixed martial arts history, and he has boasted an incredible wrestling pedigree where he was an NCAA Division I All-American wrestler from the University of Northern Colorado, wrestled against some of the absolute best in American history such as Jordan Burroughs, placed 7th in the 157-pound 2010 NCAA Division I Championship, where he claimed his All-American status, and at the end of his career, he was put into the University of Northern Colorado Athletics Hall of Fame for his achievements in wrestling. He was the first wrestler from that college to become a Division I All-American since 1970, where Larry Wagner did the same thing. Although his collegiate wrestling career was pretty stellar, how did it translate to MMA? That's what really matters here, because MMA wrestling is a lot different than amateur wrestling, and because he's fighting the best MMA wrestler in history, that is where it's going to matter the most. And also because he has wrestled in America, where there's a great difference between American wrestling and Dagestani wrestling, something I've been talking about for months now, and even at this moment, Khabib Nurmagomedov is talking about the differences as well, because he understands the differences, knowing that he's been wrestling and training in America for like the last 8 years or so, rather than where Justin Gaethje is only used to the American wrestling up until he got into MMA, and even there had to have been a limited amount of times where he has trained and sparred against different regions of wrestling around the world. Gaethje has talked about his absence of wrestling in his mixed martial arts career, especially mid to later on. Early in his career, he was wrestling a lot actually, but he has talked about how it gasses him out due to how explosive and how energy expending his wrestling style is. He talked about even in college, he was a very defensive wrestler, just stopping takedowns so he can go through all the rounds at a more comfortable pace. He exerts himself when he wrestles the opponent, so he wants to stop it entirely and make it a stand-up game where it complements his cardio a lot more. And what do you see from his wrestling style? Lightning quick, explosive sprawls, too many variations of rolls, Granby rolls, Peterson rolls, pretty much flipping over to get the opponent to roll over them, and a huge explosive movement, allowing him to stand up or completely reverse the position where he will end up on top of the opponent, and he quickly disrupts the balance, elevating the opponent at all times. He doesn't get the rolls. Now, if he ever gets in a more compromised position where the opponent going for submission or he's on the ground, they cannot scramble his way out of the position, he'll go for high-powered slams, whether they have a triangle choke on him, an arm bar, or they have his back. Doesn't matter. This is super risky because it can put himself deeper into the submission if he doesn't knock the opponent out or break the grip. The other thing he does if he finds himself on the ground, he simply gives up his back and tries to stand up, fighting off the grip. Very traditional wrestling-esque. And he's even shown this as late as his Michael Johnson fight, which is a huge thing. He's been doing his entire MMA career, and it's a huge problem going to a fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov, who absolutely capitalized in this position where other fighters could not. Michael Johnson, for example, got Justin Gaethje down against the cage. Gaethje gave up his back instinctively, stemming from his wrestling days. You know, in wrestling, you don't want to ever put your back on the ground, right? It's an instinct they developed for years, and he's been wrestling for, you know, about 25, 26 years up to that point. So giving up the back is the thing you want to go to when you're instinctively wrestling, but that is only going to expose your neck, expose your back, and Michael Johnson lacks that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu department or lacks that MMA grappling department, judo skills, and all sorts of ways you can go and submit the opponent and capitalize on this dominant position. So what you see Michael Johnson do, he just literally lets him stand up and tries to punch him in the clinch, where Khabib will use his opportunity to work wrist rides, grab onto the wrist controls, and Dagestani handcuffs, and put Justin Gaethje, while they're in this position, put him in the position you saw Khabib put Michael Johnson in and Edson Barboza in. So if it gets to the ground with Khabib, I don't see anything different. Actually, Gaethje might have that instinctive wrestling to put himself in so much more danger than anybody Khabib's ever fought up against before. His instincts might make him give up his neck, give up an arm, give up a leg to Khabib faster and earlier than anybody else. And also the fact that he hasn't been using his wrestling for such a long time and hasn't paid too much because of his wrestling. He's never been submitted. He probably doesn't know where to make the adjustments to adapt to the wrestling style, the judo style, and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style that Khabib poses. So I definitely do see the similar kind of wrestling defense and grappling defense from Justin Gaethje that we saw in the Michael Johnson fight in earlier to also be in effect when he fights Khabib. And we can all pretty much agree on that. When it gets to the ground, Khabib has a major advantage. But Gaethje's best defense is from a distance and as soon as the opponent grabs him. Like we talk about the explosive rolls and the super quick sprawl. Even more important than all of this is the phase one of takedown defense.
right in front of me. You see, I don't see. Wanna see
his feet are very quick and very smooth. It's hard to see him actually move around the cage and take these half steps backwards. And you saw that in the Tony Ferguson fight, but you also saw it in other fights as well. This puts him in the position to try to counter the opponent when they're going for takedowns, especially when he fights someone like Khabib. He's the only guy, I think, that is going to be able to counter one of Khabib's takedowns with a punch or a knee, due to his ability to move away seamlessly. We're going to talk about chain wrestling in a little bit, where it throws everything Justin Gaethje does on its head. And also Gaethje is super quick, instinctively unframing on the opponent, extending his arms on them. His arms act as poles, as measuring sticks to keep the opponent away from him, and he usually does this after he throws a strike. Whenever he feels the opponent is ducking low, he's going to put his hand on them to feel it out, measure, and create separation between him and the opponent until he feels that the takedown is not a threat anymore. This also puts the opponent in line of sight for some of his close range uppercuts, which also intercept a takedown, making it far too dangerous for the opponent to shoot in on him when he's already framing. And one more thing that Justin Gaethje does that's a little bit different that I've ever seen anybody ever do before is when opponents feint takedowns on him, he will duck and meet them head on. He covers up high, he ducks low, and he meets them, causing a collision. Because of the collision, the takedown gets thwarted, and he's able to push away the opponent or get that quick overhook and underhook like he did against Dustin Poirier. So looking at the few moments he's ever wrestled in his entire MMA career, you know he's a very powerful, fast twitch, explosive wrestler. And like I said in the beginning, it's very energy expending. It's something he knows about himself very well. And there's a huge problem going to a fight with Khabib, in my opinion. Khabib is a chain wrestler. Everybody who has tried to wrestle Justin Gaethje only shot one takedown on him before they completely disengaged from it. Nobody has ever chain wrestled him. They met his wrestling type with an explosive one-shot takedown, right? They try to explode on him, he explodes to defend it, and then they disengage. He wins those exchanges because they don't chain wrestle. They don't shoot in again after the first takedown. For instance, when you look at those sprawling positions, someone like Khabib is going to chain wrestle. He loves these kind of positions because he's able to work on you and push you up against the cage from there. What does everybody else do against Justin Gaethje? They either try to stand up, they either try to sit in the position to catch their breath and think things through, or they pull guard. That is it. You never see anything else. No one has ever tried to make Justin Gaethje work through his explosions, right? Every time he wrestles, he explodes rapidly. And in order to gas him out, they gotta keep him working, right? Gaethje's takedown defense takes a lot of energy out of him. It is nearly impossible to wrestle like this for a long period of time without gassing out, which is why chain wrestling is a huge problem against Gaethje's takedown defense. It requires him to keep exploding every given moment. It's the way he knows how to wrestle the most. Now, looking at everything about Justin Gaethje's wrestling, his defensive wrestling, it tells me that the first round against Khabib is going to be pretty problematic for Khabib to get that takedown on him, because Gaethje's going to have a full tank. He can keep defending takedowns that entire first round, but the second, third, fourth, and fifth, he's going to be a bit tired more and more after every given round. It will not surprise me at all if Khabib never takes on Gaethje in the entire first round, but he's going to try. He's going to test the cardio of Gaethje. He's going to gas him out and bring him into what he says, the deepest part of the ocean, and drown him. Even if Khabib takes the entire first round just to gas out Gaethje and never secure that takedown, he will absolutely go and do that. It's a long-term game plan for Khabib to eventually win the fight and submit or TKO Gaethje in the mid to late rounds. But that first round is going to be extremely dangerous for Khabib Nurmagomedov, probably more than anybody's ever fought in his entire career. But it's also going to require Gaethje to be a little bit more aggressive and pressuring. He cannot be the one backing up. And he knows that. He's talked about it, that he cannot put his back to the cage because he's not so much experience against the cage. Khabib is the best fighter against the cage in UFC history. He also brings that different style of wrestling, different trips, judo skills that people aren't talking about, trips and throws against the cage, trips and throws in the clinch. And those are things, again, Gaethje has limited experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!